So I've got just a very few slides here to, as Robert indicated, to give you an update of quite a bit of activity that's gone on across the U.S. with a number of groups, a lot of collaborators, and I do hope you saw some real progress today from all of the panels that presented today, both on the animal health side and on the technology side. My opinion is we're making great progress. We still got a little more work to do, and it's going to be centered around this topic. And for those of you in the back that can't read this, this says machine and machine. We have a nice connection here. This guy's all wrapped up. He's got his little standards t-shirt on, and the machine's telling the other machine, the problems always start when the humans show up. So what this means is we've got technology that's capable of exchanging information today. We've always had, and we always will. Our challenge is that person in the middle. Politics come into play, policies come into play, disagreements on, I think we heard some great examples today, not that they were disagreements, but states do things differently than their counterparts in other states. And so this is why standards development and adoption is going to be key to move some of this out of the way so we can continue on the policy road where it's more amenable to continue to exchange data when we need it. I don't know if any of you have seen this. I'm sure a few of you had, but I call this a piece of art. And let me just highlight the colleagues within veterinary services that did this research. They collected, this represents about 10% of cattle movements from paper CVIs from 49 states over a 12-month period. And so the density, the thicker the line, the more movements, et cetera, the darker the line, more movements. And this is why we need the standards in place. Because we are moving cattle clear across the U.S., always have, always will. It's really an important component of the trade organizations internationally around the globe. And the quicker we can identify these standards, the more readily we can exchange that data. Just a few things. The White House has come out in December of 2012. This document's entitled The National Strategy for Information Sharing and Safeguarding. I'm not going to get into the aspects of what the document says, other than there is leadership at the highest levels within this country to do more of this. I had the fortune to travel Europe last week, and I visited several cities and worked with many world organizations, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, WHO, WTO, and then OIE there in Paris. And you're going to see on one of these slides, the standards work is really starting to be looked at from an international perspective. And I think where the U.S., with you folks leading this charge, is in a pretty good spot to go back to some of these world organizations that we collaborate and partner with and say we've taken some leads in several of these areas. And I think animal movement would be a really nice spot to take back and say we've done a lot of work. As you know, when we start to get in the details of where we are very quickly with some of these projects, they did not happen overnight. There still is not consensus with some of the work that we've done collaboratively, and we still have more work to do. And so here's something that's taken a while to get to. It's involved hundreds of people across the U.S., and we still don't have good consensus on what really needs to happen around this standards work. And that's a tad concerning, but I think we can overcome that with more socialization of this work. Again, really, really dry topic. If you want to put lawyers to sleep, just say, hey, I want to talk to you about standards. California, they'll be asleep in your lap before you know it. And so this is just a real quick schematic of, and we all know this. We all know this. This would be an audience of trying to convince why we need more efficient data transfer, access, sharing, etc. While I was getting ready to head out to the airport, this is the Washington Post Monday, March 30th, 31st, whatever Monday was, just 2 days ago. And I apologize, it's blurry. I was in a hurry because I was trying to catch my shuttle to the airport, but this says, tech companies agree to collaborate. Washington Post. One of the group's goals, and so let me tell you who the groups were. It's down at the bottom. It's Intel, it's Cisco. You've seen all the Cisco ads on TV. It's AT&T, it's General Electric, and it's IBM. They now have agreed to drop interoperability standards so that devices, sensors, and networks, all of these companies can then create and communicate with one another, and the data they exchange can be secure. And so my hat's off to you. We've already been working on this for animal health, both surveillance and response here in the U.S. And I think we're really moving this vision forward very, very nicely. And this is just, some very large Fortune 5, Fortune 50 companies. And this topic is also coming up internationally as well. And I think when we get to the security aspect of that statement up there, that's when the guy that was wrapped around in the cartoon on the second slide, that's when this stuff starts slowing down, because that's when we tend to have disagreements of, who holds what, who owns what, who shares what, etc. Few concerns. I had assistance with this slide, but I thought it was fairly good, so I wanted to share it with you. Current privacy protection laws and procedures are not well adapted to rapidly advancing technology. Just when we think we've agreed on something, the technology's already advanced. And so that's my message to you. We really need to get to consensus on some of these standards projects and keep moving, because if we don't keep up, we're going to have new methodologies, new devices, and new challenges that we're going to need time to address those, and we're still way back here trying to figure out if we all agree on something or not. And I know it's a very, very difficult and very complex challenge, this whole idea of information sharing, and when we do that and how much do we do that, and the likes of that. Inaccurate information could lead to mismatches and false conclusions. We kind of know all that. This is pretty glaring. With growing number of users of data, just data, there's also concern about the security guidelines and mechanisms in place to prevent unauthorized access and use of this information. I think the last panel highlighted that very well. All the companies had a different approach, right? What I heard was kind of a different approach. We have agreements in all 50 states. We don't have any agreements in all 50 states. We have a combination of agreements. We haven't studied that problem, or we've got it completely solved. So that's the gamut typically when we start to examine this work. And I'm just going to get through this and tell you that there are important questions. I believe this organization, USHA, AAVLD, and groups like that, the commodity groups across the U.S., scientific groups, academia. Everybody's working on this. I think we are all working very well, and we still need that voice over on the side telling us, are you really sure you want to keep moving in this direction? Is this the most appropriate thing for all of us collectively to be doing? And that's what this kind of gets to. It's around governing and things of that type there. So let me just, there's like 2 slides left. Let me tell you where we're at. I think last year at USHA you heard from me that we had kind of 3 projects going. We had a data element standardization document. Where's Dr. Brown? Bill Brown. Yes. And Veterinary Services published that as a document. It wasn't a regulation. It wasn't a guideline. And it wasn't a order. It was just a document that says, hey, VS is going to try to standardize on specific data elements for only certificates of veterinary inspection. Not surveillance data, not response data. We can talk about animal movements not being response or surveillance, but from a technology solution perspective, it only surrounded certificates of veterinary inspection. We published that. We sent emails out. We had phone calls with y'all and said, hey, there they are. Please use them if you would like to use them. And that will begin the conversation that when the 2 machines want to talk to each other, we're sharing apples and apples, oranges and oranges, and we got one thing checked off the list. We can at least start accepting and sending standardized data elements specific to CVIs. So that was one piece of work that went on internally in Veterinary Services. We shared that with the community, that is stakeholders, partners, etc. And there is not consensus on that document. There's agreement to about 90% of the document. Is that fair, Bill? Yep. So there's agreement about 90% of the elements, and I'm here to tell you we are not going to solve the other 10% unless we want to spend 3 or 4 years locked up in rooms really, really working hard on 10% of a very complex problem. Or we agree that says, you know what, 90% is close enough to get this started. I take you back to the map. Let me see if I can't screw this up. Take you back to the map. If we can at least solve 90% of the variable requirements and get them identified and say, yeah, okay, let's at least agree to that. We're going to start approaching this in a different way, in a positive way. I'm going to skip 2 and go to 3. So then the third piece was an internal VS product that the VS executive team thought was worthy of putting a lot of focus on. And that was around how we would put in place principles around information sharing and some guidelines. And we have shared that with USHA, NASAHO, AAVLD. I think all these secretaries and commissioners of ag have received a copy of this. And nobody's really chiming in on that product, but I would suggest you give it a read because it's kind of vanilla, kind of generic, because we know when we have a very difficult data exchange problem that we're going to be faced with, this document's probably going to be set aside and we're going to have a private negotiation. And that's because of sensitivity around perhaps an emerging pathogen, around sensitivity of marketing, around sensitivity of ownership, and exposing maybe too much information. And so we're going to have one-offs. We always will. We always have. And so let's just get used to that. We're going to have one-offs. We can have everything in place. All these IT systems working really, really good and really well with each other. We will have continued one-offs to say we need to negotiate something here. So that gets the negotiation piece started. That look, if it's a regulated, federally regulated disease, VS is going to have access to that information. If it's new, if it's emerging, we'd like to share that information. We'd like to get that information from you. Again, it would be a negotiation point. So that was like the second piece of the trifecta. And then the last piece is what the presentation was entitled, is technical communications protocols specific for CVIs. So bullet one was, here's apples and apples with CVIs and oranges with CVIs. Number two says, okay, I've got all my fruit for CVIs. This is how we will exchange that data. It's defined only once. And so the plus minus is it's not quite done, but it's well started. And I didn't want to give it a red or, a down arrow or something like that, because it's been a very, very important piece of work. And so last week, the committee, and I want to thank the private companies that are helping on this. GVL, I'm going to miss somebody. GVL, Trace First, Fort Supply, Vet Sentry, then there's states, and then there's academia on this group as well. And it is a subcommittee of, help me with the committee, Dr. Beckton's committee.
It's the Animal Health Information System Committee, and the subcommittee was for IT standards.
Yes.
CVI.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's the status of that. So we took a vote via email last week. Do we want to start testing this protocol and handing it out? And I think that vote's going to come back yes, although that's my speculation. But the emails I saw was all positive. Let's get this thing out. Let's get people using it and testing it to see if it's going to do what we think it's going to do. Now, here was a fascinating question that I wasn't expecting in the email. Who is going to own this document on behalf of everybody that's going to be exchanging standardized CVI data? Is it the federal government? Is it the state government? Is it the private sector? Is it a nonprofit? More to come with that. That question is going to be the guy wrapped up with all the wires on the second slide. Because now we're starting to develop guidance, pretty technical guidance, on behalf of all of us across the U.S. and who's going to own that product. So it's a collaboratively built product. So does collaboration own it? Do consortiums own it? I think that's going to be a very challenging question for us over the next year or so as we develop more of these products. So that this is like a quick summary of where we're at on these three very separate projects, if you will, with hundreds of people involved, clear across the U.S., all kinds of organizations and companies. And it is leading us to some very effective work working together. The last slide here, this is the URL, and I think they're going to distribute these to the participants. So this is the data elements link for the CVIs. And then I wanted to let you know FAO had a document that they just developed last week that they handed out when I was there. And this is where they're at in terms of a international organization the need for policy, standards, and data exchange interoperability. This is the director of their statistics division. It's huge, huge place. So the international community is saying we really need to start thinking about this stuff. So I want to applaud you all. I think we've been thinking about it for a few years. We've made some great advances, and my compliments to you, and hopefully next year we're going to come with a few more tick marks, and we'll be that much closer to helping each other out. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Quick question while Chelsea, you want to come up, and we'll see if anybody got a quick question to John about the work that's been done. Hearing none.
Yes.
10% that you're talking about that you don't think you're ever going to be together on. Is that the ownership thing?
Not so much. So the question was, what's the deal with the 10% not coming to agreement on? And really that's about how you do business in your state. It's not so much an ownership or privacy or confidentiality deal. It's more about, I describe colors differently in our state than the state next door. Or I want to, use sex indicators on breeding cattle differently than the state next door. It's going to get down to that level of granularity where we're going to have some slight issues. But again, an owner's an owner. We got an address. There's a lot of stuff that is agreed upon. And so I'm suggesting let's start rolling with the 90%. And if y'all want to lock yourselves up in a room, I'll let you go if you want to hammer out the last 10. But I think it's going to be kind of difficult to come to full agreement on some of these things. It's a good question. Thanks.